My name is Jen Swanson. I'm one of the ministers here at Inlet United Church in lovely Port Moody, and Julie Lebrun, who's here, is our other minister. And I would like to thank you for being here for the third part of our four-part wellness speaker series, sponsored by Inlet United Church. And we originally had this as an in-person series, and then COVID happened. So here we are, and we're really glad that you're here too. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like to acknowledge that this evening is being brought to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Kwantlen, the Coquitlam, the Musqueam, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Katzie First Nation. And it is with gratitude that we recognize their care and stewardship of this land down through the generations. And I'm just going to put Julie into spotlight video now, which hopefully that worked. And I would like to introduce Dr. Julie Clayton. And Julie has been an adult educator and mental health practitioner for over 25 years. And drawing from her academic training, her experience in pastoring numerous congregations in the Salvation Army, while also teaching in varying academic institutions, Julie brings a keen desire to help people realize their best versions of themselves. Julie is now operating a private counseling practice in New Westminster called Point Consulting and Counselling Services. And Dr. Julie has been rated the top trauma therapist in the area by Psychology Today. And so we are extremely grateful to have her with us today. So welcome, Dr. Julie.
All right, thank you so much, Jen. I had no idea how close Inlet United Church is to where I live. I'm just at Coquitlam Center, so how neighborly is all of this tonight? It's awesome to be with you. So welcome everyone to this session together tonight. Grateful for the opportunity to be with you. What a beautiful relationship my business partner and myself have cultivated over these last couple of years with the United Church. We have been providing mental health first aid pretty well throughout the province. We were working into the interior before COVID hit, and had quite a number of congregations we were yet to connect with, and so all of that, of course, has been thwarted until other plans can be made. But what a beautiful experience it has been to connect in different ways with the good people of the United Church. And the one thing both my business partner and myself have said is God is doing great work in the United Church. God is alive in the United Church. And it's just been our privilege to share with that. So yeah, you heard all of that stuff that Jen said about me, but one of the things that I love the most is I am currently pastoring another congregation. It's a church plant, and we're building a congregation in New Westminster, Burnaby. And it's sitting, we were a house church two years ago, and now we've had between 60 and 80 people attending our services, and of course bringing some different dynamics with it in terms of logistics and keeping the family together, so to speak, as we're all experiencing. But it's been exciting because our church has not stopped meeting since COVID happened, and having social distancing gatherings. Sometimes we've been, 4 or 5 people standing in a big wide circle in a park, or and currently we've been connecting in Queen's Park at the band shell there, where it's big and wide and open, and we've kind of claimed the cathedral of the outdoors as our resting place right now. And well, it's just exciting to see how God works and moves. But let me tell you, in ministry, there is every evidence that there are mental health challenges that impact the functioning of God's people and the functioning of the body of Christ. And so tonight, I'm privileged to be able to bring some thoughts about all of this and how it is ministry and mental health connect together. Here we go, my very first stall of the, the slides. We'll try this again. Okay, all right. Let's see if we can make this move. I'm wondering what version of Zoom we're using here, Jen. Are we able to do breakaway groups?
Yes, we do have capability of doing that,
okay.
yes.
Okay, so I may get to break us off later on if that's relevant. Yeah. So tonight, to think about how ministry and mental health, how do they connect together? Because we all have mental health. We've come into this workshop with mental health, and we will leave this workshop with mental health. And just as we would have concerns for, say we sprained an ankle or a wrist, or we had an infection of some sort, or high blood pressure, low blood pressure, all these medical things we would seek help and support for. And so it is with mental health. And tonight we want to be thinking about the conditions under which mental health problems can develop, and how we notice that, and how we become more aware of ways in which we can be responding, particularly as we think about this within the context of being in the body of Christ. So what are we talking about when we say mental health? I'm giving you a bit of a definition to start here. The capacity of each and all of us to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with the challenges we face. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think of, that psalm. And when God looked over his creation, he said, "It is good." And when he completed his creation, he said, "It is very good." And the intent of our Creator is that we would live life well. Jesus came that we might have abundant life. And yet, for so many people, mental health can stand in the way of that victorious kind of living that we've been created to experience. So really emphasizing here the capacity we each have to live life well, to enjoy life, to deal with the challenges that come our way, and for them to not overwhelm us. And then here it is, the balance, a positive sense of emotional and spiritual well-being that respects the importance of culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. So a lot of words there to wrap your head around for sure. But if you can just get this picture to begin with tonight, that God, our Creator, has designed that we would live well, that we would know abundant life, that we would know deep joy, deep peace, and the sense of hopefulness that comes from being a part of God's kingdom. And ministry and mental health can, in fact, coexist together. I wanted to give you some statistics tonight, though, that might help provide some framework under which ministry has to, what's the word I'll use here? Coexist, connect, and for us to be aware of as we seek to bring ministry toward the mental health needs of our congregants, that in fact, there's some very specific things that are already out there going on and clearly well defined. So here's the first thing we want to know tonight. Mental illness affects all Canadians at some point in their life, whether it's something we experience personally or through a family member or friend or a colleague. Mental illness affects us all. And according to the Canadian Mental Health Society, they say this statistic that 1 in 5 people in Canada will experience a mental health problem or an illness. Now, it's 1 in 5 will experience it this year, and 1 in 3 will experience it in their lifetime. Those are the reported statistics. Those are the things that have been diagnosed. Those are the things we know about. But we also know there's great stigma around mental health, and often great reluctance for people to personally speak about what's been going on for them. And so we suspect that these statistics are actually much higher, and that you can do the math of the people that you know in your congregation, the people in your bubble, as Dr. Henry would be talking about, right? We all have mental health to some degree, and it affects people of all ages. It knows no distinction, education, income levels, cultures. We are all susceptible to mental health challenges. And approximately 8% of adults will experience a major depression at some point in their lives, and 1% of Canadians will experience bipolar, or otherwise known as manic depression. About by age 40, statistics say that about 50% of the population will have had a mental health problem. Schizophrenia, affecting 1% of our population, and anxiety disorders affecting 5% of the household population, causing mild to severe impairment. Now, again, that's what's diagnosed. If I go by what's coming in the door in my practice, it's way, way higher than that. Suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths among those ages 15 to 24, and 16% for those among the age of 25 to 44 years old. And I think we got to pay attention to that as the body of Christ. That's significant in terms of how deep people are plunging in mental health crisis, and how unfortunate that outcome can be. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age. And it may or may not surprise you, but the mortality rate due to suicide among men is actually 4 times the rate it is among women. The reason being for that, men often choose more lethal means than women, and so then there can actually be a higher degree of completion of the act of suicide. So a bit of the lay of the land here. Now, I want to just highlight for us as we open this up tonight that actually mental health struggles are really not a new concept. And I started kind of thinking in terms of the biblical sense of this. Mental health struggles existed in Scripture. And we could probably think of multiple times people were struggling with anxiety or fear, or feeling sad or feeling overwhelmed. And in fact, I read this statistic not too long ago that the word or the phrase "fear not" appears in Scripture 365 times, which I thought is kind of interesting, isn't it? That there's a "fear not" or "do not be afraid" in Scripture 365 times. So that makes it every day of the year we should be able to claim that promise not to fear. But mental health was certainly prevalent in the life of the prophet Elijah. I just wanted to bring that picture before us tonight. You might remember the context from 1 Kings chapter 19, and actually previous chapter 18. It's that great battle of the gods of Baal, and great showdown at Mount Carmel, and the gods of Baal are taunting Elijah and like, show us your stuff if you're really God, show us, prove what you can do. And it's a great day in ministry for Elijah in chapter 18, right? It's mountaintop. God performs, God comes through, God shows, the best of what God can do, and mighty evidence of the proof that God exists and God is real. And Elijah gets to, go home at the end of the day and said, yeah, see, I knew you wouldn't let me down, God, right? Look what my God can do. But it's really something quite remarkable in chapter 19, because here we've got it. Now Queen Jezebel is on the hunt. She's heard what Elijah's been up to. Her husband's come home and said, oh, here in the mail, you can look at this, but now, did you hear what happened over on Mount Carmel today? And Jezebel is irate at what's happened. And she sends out her messenger. She sends out her hit party, so to speak. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, she says, if this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. And what do we hear? Well, Elijah's afraid. He runs for his life. When he comes to Beersheba in Judah, he leaves his servant. He goes off into the wilderness. And where does he take up camp? Well, 101 Broomtree Avenue, right? Sits down and he says, that's it, I'm done. Prays that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he says. Take my life. I'm no better than any of my ancestors. And he lays down under 101 Broomtree Avenue and falls asleep. So a lot of mental health going on in those chapters, in those verses, let me tell you, because look at it with me if you would for a minute. Verse 3, Elijah's afraid. There's anxiety. Verse 3 again, there's that fight-flight response, running for his life. Well, he has good reason. Let's not be too hard on him here, because he does have, a hit party after him, and an angry queen who wants to take his life, and she's got power and authority, so he's got good reason probably to be afraid, except, of course, God really did some phenomenal things in the previous chapter, but somehow that doesn't seem to matter right now. And verse 3 and 4, Elijah isolating, he leaves his servant behind, he goes off into the wilderness, which is a common symptom of depression, being overwhelmed. And then, of course, verse 4, Elijah praying that he might die. He's done. He's had it. And so we see the depth of depression that's sinking in and some pretty severe suicidal ideation developing. If we look at that kind of big picture tonight, it helps us, I think, to recognize that mental health always incubates in a context or a situation or a circumstance. It always begins in some kind of setting and sometimes has setting events. And I think it's really important for us as church to be really looking at what is the context in which the people that we care about are moving and experiencing. And then understanding how our values and our belief systems are affected by that context and by that circumstance. And we're going to unpack more of this tonight, but this is kind of giving us a broad framework from which we'll work. So we've got context and circumstance influencing our belief systems, our values that we bring, how we interpret the meaning or the significance of our context or our circumstance. We form an opinion, and then we move in that opinion, and that can impact our feeling. And then our physiological responses happen because there's a chemistry thing between the brain and the body that's happening. And that too can impact the quality of our mental health if we lack sufficient ability to regulate or to process and control. And this can be a significant factor. Our resiliency conditioning. What is within our previous experience that helps us to be a strong pillar when the storms are washing in over us, and how that impacts whether we will rise with our mental health challenge or whether we will fall. And then, of course, the availability of our support systems and our support networks, and this being a really key part for us to understand as church, that there is significant ministry that can be done when we are able to identify the fullness of what may be going on for people. So let me break this down a little bit for us. At any point, by the way, if anyone wants to stop me, use your raise hand signal or something, and if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to make, by all means, I'm really glad to entertain that tonight. So first point here, mental health will often show up in response to a given context or a circumstance. And think about that for a minute. as you reflect perhaps on your own mental health tonight and how your situation or your circumstances may have impacted the way you think, the way you feel, and the way that you act. I can tell you in my practice, I see a lot of young children who come with often high degrees of anxiety. And let me tell you, God did not bring that child into the world with anxiety, but anxiety is something that is absorbed from the context in which they are existing. And so I can tell you pretty much, well, quite emphatically actually, that if I have a young child in the office manifesting anxiety, somewhere in the home there's also an anxious adult. And it happens almost by osmosis. You know, there's a pattern in which learning to respond to stress has happened, and it comes out of the environment, it comes out of the context or the situation. Now, we've got some big things before us as we look at how COVID-19 is impacting us in terms of context and circumstance. And it's not nothing right now that as a church, we're having to navigate the impact of a global pandemic health crisis. And even though now here in BC, we're stage 3, right? But did I hear yesterday on the news, 1,000 cases here in BC? When you count everyone who's been tested and everyone who's in treatment or recovering right now. I think it was at 30 more cases today, somebody told me. And just, I think the headline this morning being, are we now going to stop flattening the curve, and is it about ready to explode again? So here we are, just, wow, really intense, unsettling times. And it's had impact, let me tell you. It's been interesting because, again, in practice, we can't keep up with all the requests right now for people who are looking for mental health support. In fact, I could be working around the clock if I chose to. And the severity of mental health problems as a result of COVID is quite incredible. I have one young lady that I'm continuing to support that has not left her closet since all of this started, and is afraid to leave her home, even though its restrictions have lessened. She's still so terrified that she might contract this thing. And so it has had impact. Now there's studies that are taking place, and researchers who are trying to capture in kind of a statistical way what's been the impact. And so there's a few things that we can share with you here tonight. I want you to look at this particular slide for a moment. So this is change in self-perceived mental health since the onset of physical distancing. Now notice here, I hope everyone can see this well enough. If you look at the blue, it's basically pointing to where there has been a worsening of the condition, and the dark blue being no change or maybe even improving. So look what's happening with our young people, age 15 to 24. Definitely worsening, significantly worsening. And then it just continues to follow online. Interestingly, I've asked a few people this question, who do you think has struggled the most since COVID? A lot of people say the seniors are the ones who have struggled the most. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it may be for the seniors, while some things are less available to them, their way of functioning day to day may not have changed a whole lot, right? And so here we go, age 65 and older, no change is the highest in this. I think it probably is not taking into consideration here seniors who have been in care facilities. I think we're looking at people who live independently here. but I think it would probably be a different study if we were to calculate those that have been in care facilities. Now, how do you find yourself responding to that? Can we open it up for a minute for some conversation? What do you think about this particular picture here? Does it resonate with what you would expect or what you've seen? Any surprises? Let's have some conversation. What do you think?
May I?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, by the way.
Hi, Jen.
I'm in that age group of 65 and older, and I will say it's not no change or better. We are isolated. We can't travel. Granted, it's not a first world problem. I get that, but you know, it changes our lives. We can't go out. We're not socializing. We're not in restaurants. Much like the youth, right?
Yeah, it's true, right? So we are trying to make a distinction here because yes, the change, that's a given, right? The restrictions that we've had to experience. Yeah. What we're asking here is, has that impacted mental health, right? Has that had an impact on our day-to-day functioning in terms of how we work, how we function in school, or in relationships, right? And so I wonder where we may not see as much change here in response, because maybe is there more resiliency in this particular age bracket? I don't know. What do others think about this? I'm curious about your perspectives. What do you think?
I think a lot of it has to do with those of us on pensions that aren't worrying about our income.
True. Yeah.
That's a good point, Jan. Nice to meet you, by the way. Welcome. Yeah. So less financial vulnerability. Yeah. What
but
else?
More isolation.
Sorry?
But more isolation. We're not
Yeah.
with our grandchildren, and yeah.
Does it make sense for you to see the large numbers around the young people? What do you think about that?
The resiliency isn't there? Is that?
Quite possibly, yeah.
As a family that had a grade 12 graduate this year who wasn't able to graduate with a prom, there's a lot of loss and disappointment, and I think not being able to connect with friends in the same way has been a real challenge for many of them.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Jen, because at least the kids I'm seeing in my practice literally wake up in the morning, it's like, now what do I do? Especially now, it's become like a 6-month summer holiday. Somebody said to me today, I'm just on an endless summer holidays.
It's true.
Yeah. Any other comments about this particular slide? It's so interesting, the data that is starting to come in about this. Now, let me offer you some other pieces here then. So we talked about seniors having, the secure pension, so they're not worried about the income factor and how they're going to cover their bills. But in a crowdsourcing survey, 43% of the participants who were asked, how is your financial obligation impacting your mental health right now, and that we're living in COVID. And 43% of those participants recognized they had symptoms that were consistent with moderate or severe anxiety developing. Just on that front of, how am I going to pay my bills? And what's that going to look like? What have we got? 1/3 here felt that maybe it was too soon to tell, and you can see a small margin saying no financial impact, and yet they're still feeling there's that level of moderate or severe anxiety that's developing. And so again, in ministry, it's really important to know the landscape in which we're working and moving. And to be effective, to be empathetic, to be supportive, we really got to have an understanding of what is impacting the people that we're trying to support and serve. I had a young man in my office tonight, just before I had come into this workshop. He's 9 years old and he's experiencing anxiety like I've never seen it actually in a child. Every week I see him, there's a new worry monster inside of him, right? And tonight he said to me, Dr. Julie, he said, there's just some people in my life who keep telling me to grow up, that it's not real. Just be a man, you know. And this little 9-year-old is like, but I'm so scared, right? And so it is having real impact. And to be able to minister effectively, we have to be able to get inside the landscape of where this is developing, how it's developing, and how we can, in fact, make a difference. So COVID-19 has had lots of impact here, right? There has been isolation and health scares, things that are no longer accessible to us. Devastation in our economy. I heard a report yesterday, a gentleman who owns, I think it was 7 restaurants here in the Lower Mainland, and he has maxed out every credit card and every line of credit and has no idea how long it's going to take him to dig out of all the debt he's in as a result of this. You can guarantee that there are significant mental health problems coming. And our framework as church has been redefined for us. We can't stand at the door on a Sunday and shake everybody's hand and have a pulse on what's going on. And we're being forced to think very differently at how we do this. The landscape of our city has changed. You can't just run into this store and buy a liter of milk and be in and out in 2 or 3 minutes. It's going to take time. And just trying to anticipate what is coming next. What is our new normal? How do we understand this? And what we know here is that we can expect a significant mental health crisis coming in the future. A mental health pandemic is approaching. Mental health professionals are predicting. And in fact, in the new Diagnostic Statistical Manual that is currently under revision, the DSM-6, I believe it is, they are projecting the inclusion of a new mental health disorder called COVID stress disorder. Included in that will be understanding of, symptoms like people stockpiling their supplies, constantly checking media, fearing to go outside, paranoia about health and wellness, and this coming as a significant evolution of what has been taking place in the landscape of mental health. And this is a significant moment in our history as a nation, as a world, in a global context, because we have not seen an event like this measured in history. Not even 9/11 is an adequate comparison, because the anxiety created by that event was at least limited by a certain portion of geography. But in our case here, there are no limits to how this pandemic has affected. And there's no one excluded from the mental health challenges. Who can we see as at risk here? So definitely we see young people vulnerable, those who have been financially crippled by the crisis, those who have experienced the loss of a loved one, those who've had pre-existing mental health problems or unresolved, unprocessed trauma, those who've had substance-related problems. So if you had been an individual who perhaps managed stress by use of substance prior to COVID, good chance that use has accelerated at this point in time. And then of course, the poor, the marginalized, of our communities who are struggling to find their way to access resources. And in the end, I think probably, we go back to that slide with all the bars on it. We're all affected by this. We're all at risk for mental health decline, and understanding that if we can recognize that now as church and in our ministry approach, we begin processing and projecting ways in which we can help individuals interrupt this, it's going to be so much better than we have the full pandemic again in terms of the mental health perspective, and we haven't taken time to be forward thinking. And so tonight I'm really praying as a body of believers, we're going to see ways in which the church can be instrumental in interrupting this negative cycle and helping people find their way through this storm. So outside of all of that, of course, we've added another layer, haven't we, to what has been globally represented, and now it's deep cries for justice and healing, and how this context is now in fact impacting mental health and the wellness of people. Now the fight has been brought out in so many, and that cry and that longing that order and justice would be restored in our land. That too, my dear friends, is going to have its emotional weight upon us. So if we look for some application here, in response to circumstance and context, we want to be asking ourselves, how is circumstance and context impacting the people around us? And how might it be impacting us personally? I wonder if we could take some time here. How are we doing? Yeah, Jen, do you think you could put us into groups here? Are you able to do that?
Yes, it'll just take me just a second.
That you do the math, but groups of 2 or 3. And I would just like you to spend some time, maybe we'll give you 3 or 4 minutes, it won't be long, but just answer that first question. How do you think context and circumstance is impacting the people around you? What are you seeing right now? What are your observations? You might just want to jot the question down, because I don't know if we have the ability to send it into the room with you. But how context and circumstance is impacting people around us. And yeah, we'll give you maybe 3 or 4 minutes just to discuss that. And then if one person from your group can come back and be ready to give us a summary of what you've talked about. Can we do that?
Yes, and the breakout rooms are not recorded. So just so you know, so whatever you share stays in your little breakout room. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. All right, welcome back, everyone. We didn't lose anyone in cyberspace, so that's a good word for tonight. All right, so Jen, I don't know how many groups do we have? Do we have 2 or 3?
We have 3.
Okay, so group number 1. I don't know if you know who you are, but do we have a spokesperson from group 1? And just give us a sense of how you were responding to the question. Anyone?
That's Jan and Julie.
Okay.
Other Julie.
Yeah, we seem to know a lot of people that were being affected in a lot of different ways.
Mm.
And just at the end, we were talking about how not having an end in sight that we could sort of push towards made it harder, because we don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah. So just that sense of the unknown, the ambiguous in this, the uncertainty is certainly impacting. Group 2, thanks, Jan, that was awesome. Group 2, what were you observing?
Nadine, I think that's us, right?
Yep, that's us.
I think we were mainly saying people were missing people.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
So true.
And neither of us felt that we knew people that were impacted financially to any degree, but
Okay.
you certainly see that everywhere you go with businesses closed and, you know, hearing about food banks and
mhm.
that kind of thing. You certainly, it impacts you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And how about group 3?
Carla, no?
Oh, we talked a lot about resiliency and adaptability. So yeah, we talked about the young people in our lives, and also just our businesses in general having to make changes. And I think the good general comment out of our discussion was that the only constant is change. Is that how we put it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may add, what is normal?
Mm-hmm.
There is no normal. And I think being resilient and adaptable and spontaneous, those are all human traits that we need more than ever right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, just kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, for our younger population, we've had less opportunity to practice that or to have to put that in motion. But then for the older population, we've had more experience in having to navigate change and the unpredictable. And so maybe that heightens our awareness that, this is going to be hard, or, it's going to stretch us or make us uncomfortable. And so we're navigating it from a different perspective. Thank you for all those good comments. It is true, people are missing people. I keep hearing it. I just want to hug everybody. Can I just please give somebody a hug? And how hard that has been for people that really are, geared to be connecting with each other. And really, that's how we've been created as social beings. So all of this comes to the foreground and really requires us to take notice and to really look and see what's going on with people. How are they being impacted by context and circumstance? Now we're going to do a little bit of a shift here again. Hope this works. Here we go. So when we start to take that look, we want to be, if we can, trying to do some assessment. And this isn't to make us all mental health professionals or psychologists or clinical counselors in this, but this is to generally understand that there is a continuum under which mental health may fall. And here we have it. You can see that it is quite possible through all of this, people will remain in the green zone, where they will be healthy, they'll have normal functioning. What we know to be true of them prior to COVID-19 is still true of them today. They're able to maintain their routines and their activities, and physical health and sleep hasn't been changed, and they're actually doing well. Emotionally, they're keeping positive perspective, and they fall in the green zone. But some of the people we might be thinking about tonight may actually be falling in that yellow zone, where it's caution now being raised, and they're just starting to react. And so they might become more irritable or impatient, or seem more nervous or more sad or overwhelmed. And you can see the spectrum of categories that exist for someone who might be reacting. It may be that another person we know falls into the darker injured category here, where now there is some impairment of functionality. Anger is more intense, anxiety is more intense, pervasive sadness or hopelessness, poor work performance, restless sleep, recurring nightmares, aches and pains, fatigue, and on it goes avoidance, withdrawal. And if someone is falling in that category, even more red flags should be going up here, and significant need for that person to get professional care. And then if someone is actually in the red zone, then clinical support is needed, and the potential of a disorder or a mental health condition is actually evident. So like depression and suicidal thoughts could be present, inability to fall asleep or stay asleep, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, physical illness, constant fatigue, and on the list can go, and you can see the spectrum here. There's a part of this continuum where self-care and social support can be enough, but there's a part of this continuum where professional care will be required. And sometimes our ministry response here is to try and make that distinction. Where is it I can be a caring, supportive friend, and I can help interrupt this negative mental health cycle? Where is it the church can come alongside and be a support system? But where is it necessary sometimes to make that referral to a mental health professional, or even the family doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, where actually deeper mental health supports can be activated? The key thing here is to recognize the fluidity of the continuum, because it's possible someone who is in the red zone with the right help and support can move to the green zone. And in fact, we can stay in the green zone if we have the right help and support. And here, the question is to ask as believers, as followers of Christ, how can we be part of that ministry team? How can we be part of that support team? You don't have to answer this question out loud tonight, but I wonder if you could ask yourself where you might be on this continuum, where you would find yourself. Where were you before COVID-19? And where might you be now? And what about the people that are closest to you, your family, your closest friends? Where are they on this continuum? And where might they have been before COVID-19? Are you seeing any changes? Are you seeing any difference? Because context and circumstance can be a very clear defining factor here. Just before I move into the next section here, are there any questions or comments on what we're saying?
Yeah, I had a comment. And this is just a concern. You know, I've come to learn that it can be quite difficult to actually get help.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, different people, I've tried to help them get help, and it can be really hard. So when someone does need help, it's not as easy as just telling them to go and get help. You know, it can be very challenging. And it's a bit shocking how difficult it can be to get help. Not everybody can afford private counseling, and getting public help unless you're extremely ill, it can be, you know, near impossible. You pretty much, you're with your doctor if you have a doctor. So it's just something to be aware of. And I mean, I've also come to the place too now where I'm really reluctant to call the police for a wellness check. I've actually felt that way for a couple of years, but now that position is really secured. So these are bigger systemic problems that I wonder, you know, what kind of role the church can have in that too.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Julie, because it really is true. I can't tell you how many calls I get into my practice where the first question is, are you taking any new patients right now?
Mm-hmm.
And we work, I have interns who are also in our practice, and we work to never turn anyone away if we can, in all possibility, make it happen, right? but it's tricky and it's challenging. And like you say, private practice does cost money. There are community programs available, but often long waiting lists, and then it's short-term counseling. And if someone has, a significant mental health problem, they're probably not going to get the length of treatment that they need and deserve. Mm-hmm. So I think, does this not make a case for the church to think about what we can do to step into the gap? I think that's what we're supposed to do as church, right? Figure out where the gaps are, and then step in there.
Yeah.
And
we're going to be starting something new actually at our church, at Inlet Church. I can talk about it at some point if you want me to, but I don't want to take up your time.
Go ahead. We'd love to hear about it.
Do you want to hear about it now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we haven't even started advertising this because it's so new. We're just getting our ducks in a row to get started. In a few months, in several months, we'll get started. But we're going to be doing a mental health wellness program and a mental health education program where we'll be partnering with the Canadian Mental Health Association and offering an 8-week wellness program. And so we're really excited about that. We're just getting facilitators trained. We'll have 2 facilitators in the congregation, and myself being one of them and one other person. And we started this before the pandemic. And now that the pandemic has hit, the Canadian Mental Health Association's webpage is just high traffic zone. They're getting lots of requests, lots of calls. And in fact, the provincial government gave a bunch of money to the Canadian Mental Health Association to offer this program. It's called Living Life to the Fullest. To offer it online, there's a whole bunch of new courses being offered online to address the anxiety and depression people might be feeling now. So that's a really exciting up and coming program that we're going to be launching down the road.
Awesome. Yeah.
And the way that I really got wanting to do this program was I've had people come to me over the years, needing counseling and needing more help than I could give them, and referred them to different places, and they couldn't get any help. Mm-hmm. It was just unbelievable to me. So this is an option for some people. Some people need other things, but so Living Life to the Full will be coming down the road through Inlet United Church.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And as you're developing that, I would encourage you as well to be just thinking about what other networks you have within the community itself. Mm-hmm. And, so 8 weeks will be an awesome resource, but then will you need some follow-up after that, and where can you refer to after that? So brilliant that that's happening. Way to go. Yeah, that'll be, it's so exciting. So understanding here again, we want to be looking to try and get the lay of the land here, so to speak. What's going on with the people around us, and how can we be meeting the gap and stepping into the gap? So context and circumstance, first point here. The second thing is to be looking at how values and belief systems can impact mental health. What I believe will impact what I feel, and it will also impact how I respond. And you see a bit of the triangular diagram I provided on the sideline here. So, maybe I'm that person who has those 7 restaurants in the community, and I'm saying, wow, I just cannot handle this continuing financial stress. This is too much. I'm never going to get out of the debt that I've incurred as a result of this. So that's my thought. My feeling is, well, okay, I'm going to be feeling anxious. I'm going to be feeling overwhelmed. I'm going to be feeling sad, probably fearful. How do I keep feeding my family? And then the action may be like Elijah, let's move into 101 Broomtree Avenue, right? And we want to give up, we want to isolate. Or for some people, we might take that stress out on others. And we've certainly seen through the last number of months escalation in domestic violence and the abuse of children. and on it goes from here. So our thinking will impact our feeling and will impact our emotion, our action. So we're going to give you some more case studies here to look at. We're going to do breakaway groups again. So I've got 3 scenarios here. Group 1, if you can think about what kind of potential negative thoughts could develop for someone who is experiencing COVID fatigue. And group 2, someone who might be experiencing excessive work stress. And group 3, someone experiencing continuing behavior struggles with a child. So you could just take a few minutes, chat with each other, and make a list of the things that you think they would begin to think. And then let's think about what it makes them feel and what might be the action. So going back to the triangular thing, what makes them think, what does it make them feel, and then what might be their potential actions. So again, group 1, someone experiencing COVID fatigue. Group 2, someone experiencing excessive work stress. And group 3, someone experiencing some behavior challenges with their child. All right, welcome back everyone. Awesome. All right, so let's go to group 1 again. Someone experiencing COVID fatigue. What would be the thinking, feeling, action kind of progression we might see in that?
Sure. Okay, Jan nominated me to speak, so I'll speak. For thinking, we talked about could be judging and blaming others for not doing their part in preventing things. And also just the thinking of this is going on too long and there's no end in sight.
Mm-hmm.
So that could lead to feelings of hopelessness, feeling fed up or feeling angry or frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And the action we saw as just being really tired and low energy, kind of like a giving up, loss of motivation,
Mm-hmm.
kind of actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, we can see the slide, right?
Yeah.
So one of the reasons, thank you, very well conceptualized, that was awesome. One of the things we're trying to do here tonight is to actually get inside what the challenges are for people as they're navigating context and circumstance. So how about group 2? Someone who is worrying of excessive work stress. What do we have there?
We said for thinking, you could be thinking, I hate my job, I can't cope. If you're working from home and having to deal with multiple roles and responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling frustrated, anxious, overloaded, inadequate, maybe angry.
Mm-hmm.
And for actions, well, we we first went to the positive side, but the negative side would be taking it out on colleagues and family, getting apathetic about your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so again, we can see how the continuum can progress. When we start with a negative thought, it accentuates to a negative feeling, and then it limits us in terms of how we can respond positively. How about group 3, someone experiencing struggles with a child behaviorally?
Oh, sorry. We talked about how an experience like that can be all-consuming, and so it can, take up a lot of our thoughts, and feeling inadequate as a parent, and it can lead to lots of sleep, and then also the way that we interact with other people in our lives, because we're stressed about that sort of, like, about the our child. And so yeah, not eating properly, not sleeping properly, and
Not looking after
overall stress. Yeah.
Okay.
And really impacting other relationships as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Carla, for that. So again, to try and conceptualize here the impact of thinking, feeling, action, and then how that begins to overflow. And so we want to be asking some key questions of assessment as we look for signs and symptoms. Is someone potentially moving into that yellow or that orange zone in the continuum, maybe even approaching the red? And so how is the person doing in their work or school? That's going to be a really key way of just very quickly saying, maybe there's something up here. Or how are they doing in relationships? They're irritable, they're in conflict all the time, they're not able to listen and respond appropriately, the social skills aren't managing the moment, so to speak, and relationships are strained in this. And then to take another step back and go, and what is consuming their thinking and their emotions? What's their conversation about all the time, right? The little guy I had in my office tonight, it was very much every part of his body has a worry monster attacking it right now. Right? Every part of his body started with eyes and ears and chest and arms and every part of his body. And what's consuming the thinking of the people we care about? What's consuming their conversation? And how is that showing up as a sign or symptom in that continuum? To care for others, to invite people into our community and to help them feel supported, you have to get inside their experience and begin to actually be able to empathize with the thing that is going on for them. So context and circumstance, and then understanding the impact of negative cognitions, the thinking part of it. And then there's also the physiological part of it, and how the brain and the body contract together here, and some of the challenges that come. Just a little bit of quick neuroscience here for us. Imagine that this is representing the fullness of your brain tonight. It's a very simplistic picture of the brain, but imagine this represents the brain. And this green section in the middle represents the feeling zone of the brain. The brown section represents the intake, the brainstem, where information comes in and registers a threat or some kind of instinctual response. And that comes into this green part, the feeling part of the brain. And often when there's excessive stress, it gets stuck there. And what we need are good neural pathways between the green part of the brain and the purple part of the brain. The purple part of the brain being the thinking part of the brain, the logic, the reasoning, the ability to imagine, the ability to process, the ability for logic. So what happens in anxiety is it all gets stuck in the middle, in the green, and it doesn't have the pathways open to move as it needs to. And then it translates down into the body. And if you can just look at the detail here, when scripture in Psalm 139 says how fearfully and wonderfully we are made, God is a very detailed creator. And if you just look at this yellow system of veins that we can see just running the nerve system all around, you get the cross view on the right side and the front view on the left side. And this is the vagus nerve, which is directly impacted by the overload of the brain on the green, that feeling zone I was talking about. It's like the air conditioner in the brain. When it gets closed down, everything overheats. And it comes down through this vagus nerve. So when you're really stressed and you feel like, your chest tightens, or your pulse is raising, or your blood pressure is going up. That's the vagus nerve around the heart and the lungs doing what it does, constraining. And then has anyone ever like had a bit of a queasy stomach when you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed? Vagus nerve doing its thing. Headaches, muscular aches, vagus nerve. Right, you see how it goes up right behind the eyes at the top of the picture here. And so when someone is experiencing stress or anxiety or depression, there's actually a physiological thing that's going on, and it translates into two pathways in the nervous system, a sympathetic pathway and a parasympathetic. And if I can be in my parasympathetic self, that's probably going to be good, because I will be able to dial it down, relax that nerve system, and find some ability to regulate. But if I'm in the sympathetic side of things, you'll see it can bring on the more negative symptoms: high blood pressure, muscle tension, anxiety, irritability, fatigue, depression, etc. And in seeking to support someone in who's developing a mental health problem, or actually in a mental health crisis, one of the things we can start teaching is how to just relax the body and how to dial it down. I'm sure, Julie, somewhere in your wellness program, there's going to be some emphasis on relaxation, right? So the question we want to ask here is, what symptoms do we see showing up in the body of the people around us? And you can tell a lot by how people hold themselves in a chair, or how they walk into a room, or how they fidget, or how they move, how much stress is in their body, and how they speak about what they feel in their body. Excessive headaches, muscular aches, shortness of breath, stomach aches. And then we look at the frequency, the intensity, and the duration. And is it ongoing for this person? Because again, that would be more evidence that the mental health problem is developing, or they may in fact be in a mental health crisis. And perhaps for us to ask tonight, as we think about this, who is at risk around us for the development of a mental health problem based on this part of the framework, right? So we've got the context and circumstance, we've got the values and belief systems, and now we've got observations about the body, what's going on physiologically within the person. All these being key factors that contribute to understanding what could be going on with the person. Any questions or comments on that piece before I move into the next section here? Questions or comments? Have you seen pictures of the vagus nerve before? Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yes, thanks, Julie.
This is, I've become more aware of the community not being together to worship, because I think being together to worship helps calm us down and helps that parasympathetic nervous system come in by, we do prayers for that reason, different type of prayer. We sing together. The rhythm of worship actually helps our bodies calm down. And this is just a loss that I've noticed since we've not been together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how do we compensate for that? Does anyone have any thoughts about how we step into that gap? If we can't be worshiping together and that sense of soothing that comes from that, what do you see as our options?
I've noticed that we have the connection time, the check-in is the most important part of the online gathering when we do gather at different times after church, during our Zoom coffee time, or in our midweek gathering. The finding out how each other is doing seems to take up the majority of the time and is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this happens in any of your church Zoom meetings, but it happens in the ones I lead. I'm usually the one that's doing what Jen's doing tonight, and I'm sending out the invites and doing all the facilitation and so forth. But I notice at the end, there are people who don't want to leave, right? They just want to sit there and look at each other on the screen, and it's like, don't cancel me out yet, right? And how significant it is. We are created for community. How much we need each other. Yeah, so it is, and being able to regulate the body is a huge part of how we manage our stress, and being able to navigate that. Any other comments or thoughts?
Another thing that our ministers have been able to do with the YouTube services is to bring in some of the outdoors, and some of the natural pictures have been a useful, I think, addition to our worship services.
As well as the good music. I find I didn't know how I would respond to online services, but they have been very important. And the Thursday afternoon and the coffee Zoom afterwards, as Jen said, that connection of people is wanting to know how everybody is, and it's a time to communicate, and you've got that deep feeling of connection. It would be such a loss without it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? We really do need each other, don't we? We're better together. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, let's talk about resiliency tonight. Resiliency conditioning. Recognizing what is it that holds a person together if their address is 101 Broomtree Avenue? If that's your reality, if you find yourself there, what holds you together, and how does the church help to contribute to the resiliency that can form or be conditioned in a person? Well, I think from my own perspective, it's a lot about the testimony of the saints and how we model the way that God's grace has carried us in the past and how it sustains us here in the present. And Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. God, our ever-present refuge, our ever-present help in trouble. And the way that we testify to that good news. What is resiliency? It's the capacity of a system to tolerate disturbance without collapsing, to withstand the shocks, and to rebuild itself when necessary, and to improve itself when possible. I think that's a pretty good statement, actually. I'm going to read it again just so you have a minute to let it soak in. The capacity of a system to tolerate disturbance. So we've got lots of disturbance that we're having to manage here. To tolerate disturbance without collapsing, to withstand the shocks, and to rebuild itself when necessary, to improve itself when possible. You know, I heard a powerful sermon yesterday. I don't know if any of you follow the broadcasts of Dr. David Jeremiah, but he was preaching a powerful sermon yesterday. I heard it on the radio as I was driving to work, and he was talking about how, you know, there's coming that day when all things will be made new. Behold, no more tears, no more crying, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more suffering. Behold, the old things will be passed away and all things will become new. And it was so interesting how he was unpacking the exegesis of that, because he was talking about it. It's not that God is wiping out everything that is created and starting fresh again, but it was this sense of a refreshment that is going to come to the earth, a renewal to the earth, and God lifting out or eliminating all the things that have been negative and restoring it to his good purpose, when, you know, it's the Genesis 1 again, where God being able to look at his creation and go, yeah, that's good. That's very good. And being able to live in the fullness of that. So it's that pressing toward hope and that vision of the better tomorrow that I think sustains a person in resiliency. And some people will be succeeding through COVID. Some people will not be succeeding. And it's how we begin to recognize who's living under 101 Broomtree Avenue, who's living there, and what's going on for them. I always think of a story told by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is a world-renowned trauma therapist, and he tells a story of a young man he interviewed following the falling of the 9/11 towers. And it was a little 5-year-old guy who had been in one of the daycares adjacent to one of the buildings. And these kids had drawn some pictures of what they had witnessed the day of the tragedy. And it was quite interesting because this little guy, when Dr. van der Kolk went in to talk to these children and interview them, this little guy refused to show his picture of the towers. And Dr. van der Kolk saying, well, what's that about? Why don't you want to show me the picture of your tower? And he said, you have to give me $5 first. Right? And he was learning that in the strife of what he was experiencing, there was an opportunity to make some money. 5-year-old, you have to give me $5 first. I think that kid had some resilience, right? Yeah. And he knew how to kind of stand up, and something was being modeled for him that was enabling him to think of the opportunities rather than just to be in the crisis. And I think that's what resilience is about. We see opportunity, and we rise above the crisis. I think the Chinese interpretation of the word crisis is actually opportunity, if you've ever looked at that. And so there's a sense in which this can happen in the midst of mental health challenge. Resiliency can rise up. One of the reasons I'm a trauma therapist is because I am a survivor of past trauma. But I can tell you this, that I'm so thankful that God gave me parents who, I don't know, they had an internal strength that made a huge impact on my life. And I know particularly for my mother, nothing much seemed to rattle her. You know, she had the ability just to move through things. And I don't know if it was something to do with her deep British personality where, you know, you just keep pulling up your socks and marching because that's what proper British girls do. She used to tell me that sometimes. Right. But this sense of that spirit that can rise up in us and can move beyond the crisis and see the opportunity. And that's what we're hoping to see when we're trying to minister to people who are developing that mental health problem or in fact in the mental health crisis. And then lastly tonight, to talk about the importance of our support systems and our support networks. We are better together. Do you believe that tonight, church? We are better together? Yeah, and I hear Hebrews 10 and 25 for us tonight. Let us not stop meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as we see the day approaching. Now, granted, God is requiring us to think outside the box as to how that meeting happens. But I'm deeply troubled by some churches that I know of that have simply closed down, you know, not even doing online. And how sad that has been, that at a time when the togetherness of God's people is most required, we've abandoned that practice. And so it's an invitation tonight for us to be thinking about what are our existing support systems in our congregation, and what capacity do we have to build new support systems or to extend and enhance the systems that we already have in place, and in fact what that could look like. We want to be looking for where people might be at risk. Are they developing a mental health problem? Are they actually in full-blown crisis? And to consider the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of the symptoms. Are you seeing a pattern? And if that's happening, consider, is this something that self-help can intervene with and the support of the local body? Or in fact, do we need to actually seek out more thorough clinical resources for that person? If you have a chance down the road to consider taking the Mental Health First Aid course that is put out by the Mental Health Commission of Canada, this is the one course we've been bringing around to the different United Churches. If you have a chance to come and be part of that course with us, I think you would find it quite helpful to expand this dialogue tonight and to get some more resources as to how we actually do this assessment work, and then how we open up the conversation. And so here are just a few key points here without going into a lot of detail. But if we sense that someone is vulnerable to a mental health problem or a mental health crisis, then approach. Show that you care. Be truly present to the person, right? Move into their neighborhood, move into their boat. They're sailing in some pretty stormy seas and probably feel like their vessel is being flooded, possibly going down, and they need someone to get in the boat with them and help them bail. And as followers of Jesus, we get to be those people, to love others as we love God, and we seek to be that presence, that caring presence in the world. So move into the boat, move under the broom tree, be there and be present, show that we care. And then it's about a non-judgmental presence. It's about unconditional positive regard, holding that the person who is struggling, they are the experts on themselves. And we actually don't get to have an opinion about what's going on in terms of their mental health. We just want to be present with them, and we want them to know that we are a safe place for them to begin to unpack the details of what's going on for them. This next one is really important. It's about normalizing the struggle. I said it earlier, we all have mental health. Every single one of us. We are all vulnerable to mental health challenges. Every single one of us. There is no distinction here to be made. And sometimes it can make a really big difference to be in a setting where, you know, you look around the room and you go, oh, you have that challenge too? Yeah, me too. Right? And just the relief that can come, that can bring for someone who may otherwise feel like it's too stigmatizing to be able to speak about their problem. In the church where I'm serving, we regularly speak about the fact that we all have mental health challenges. You can't be a human being with human DNA living on planet Earth without some understanding that we all have mental health challenges. It is just part of how we've been wired. And we're all navigating context and circumstance. We're navigating the whole sense of the physiological, the thought systems, the beliefs. We're all navigating all these moving pieces, and in the end it affects us. And it may be then the final piece here is to encourage support, professional help, where that may in fact be appropriate. Joining the support group like Julie was talking about earlier, brilliant. Anything that we can do to help a person know they're not alone in this, and that in our ministry focus, they matter, and we care, and we get it, and we're able to move to the address where they're struggling. So I've got one final case study here for us to look at, and maybe what we'll do is we'll try and do this again in our breakaway groups, just to give us one final opportunity. So what I'm going to say is, given all the things we've talked about here tonight, I'd like you to think about what would be your response to this particular situation. So Sarah is a member of your congregation who reports trouble sleeping and often feels very low energy. She is very concerned about a second wave of COVID returning and has become increasingly concerned about leaving her home. She has recently started having panic attacks, feeling shortness of breath. She has pains in her chest, and she says she is ready to give up on everything. As a fellow follower of Christ, serving and supporting in the same congregation, if that was someone coming across your path, how would you be responding to them tonight based on the things that we've spoken about? So can we again, Jen, can you work your magic and send us off to our groups here? And we'll give you another 5 minutes or so, 5 minutes or so, and then we'll hear from you in terms of your response. And then I'd love to hear some feedback from what we've talked about overall tonight. Thanks so much, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, well, let's mix things up here a bit. So you have the case study to think about and to process. How about group 3? Can we start with you? Can you tell us what you were thinking in response to this?
My group 3?
I think so.
I believe that the outcome of ours was we would be treating them like as if they were a friend. Any friend that we realized was sinking or needing some extra attention, we would be there with texts or Zoom meetings or driveway meetups, and all the coping mechanisms that we've all incorporated for our social life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. Anything else you wanted to add?
Where's my partner? Where is she? What do you want to add? Are you muted?
That's about all we talked about, like that we would just want to involve them and kind of try to get their, like, acknowledge what they're going through, but also have them do normal things that made them maybe feel like life was a little bit more normal than it felt to them. So if there is such a thing as normal. Sorry, there's a lot of noise in my house right now.
Well, just that sense of being present, yes, and using the strategies we have in place to be that. I love it. How about group 2? What were you thinking?
Okay, we found that that was a very difficult thing with all of those symptoms to try and deal with. But again, sort of that idea of offering to, maybe meet up for coffee or calling them, listening, and non-judgmental type listening, maybe suggesting if they could talk to a family member or someone that they felt like they could talk to. Nadine, anything else?
No, I was just going to say, we found it hard not to sort of jump in and try and solve everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so difficult because you think, well, we could do this, we could suggest, have they seen a doctor, and, maybe saying, well, you could go talk to your minister or, go out, but that's going too far, because probably at an initial kind of chat, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, because we do want to avoid the problem solving, because then we're not really being present to the person and allowing them to move organically with us in it, which is really important. So opening up the conversation, but allowing it to be led by them is really, really important. It also helps to establish some trust and that you're a safer place to maybe even go deeper if that feels appropriate. Yeah. So thanks for making that distinction. That's important. Anything else you wanted to add? No? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay, great job, ladies. How about group one? What were you thinking?
We suggested that we should find out what kind of support that person had. You know, what was her support system like, and then sort of see if we could fill in some of the gaps if there were any gaps.
Beautiful, beautiful, excellent insight. Yeah. And of course, this is someone that you're going to want to try and initiate conversation with. You would try to come alongside and you would say, yeah, empathizing, living through COVID has been really intense and hard for a lot of people, and the kinds of things you're experiencing. Lots of people are feeling those same challenges, and but you know, it's unique to her what she's going through, so we want to honor that. But some people actually have benefited from getting help and support, and what kind of help and support do you think would be helpful? And so we're trying to open up that conversation and actually invite them to experience a deeper thing. So we have obviously the thing here is we want to be present, we want to be engaging, we want to be empathetic, and we want to try and listen and basically get under the broom tree with the person and allow them to feel the support and the nurture of what the body of Christ can bring to their situation. And that would become a trusted presence for them. So obviously this is all about what we call holistic wellness. Mental health is about holistic wellness. It's about the physical, the emotional, the spiritual well-being, and that we could all live in a way, as we go back to the beginning of our presentation, where we can embrace life challenges and experience the fullness of who it is God has created us to be. God said his creation was good, very good. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And we are currently we're in kingdom processing mode, I think. The kingdom is, and the kingdom is yet to come. And, you know, to leave us on this note, we are pressing on toward eternal hope. There is coming a day when he will wipe every tear from every eye, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, no more cancer, no more sickness. The old things will be passed away, and God is going to refresh his creation, and he will make all things new. And sometimes if we can just speak that word of hope into a person's life like Sarah and encourage them to see the bigger picture of what God is doing, will do so much to renew both the mental and the physical sense of our perspective in things. So that's pretty much all I have for us this evening. Ladies, can I say what an amazing group you've been? You've been so engaging and such great insights you've brought forward. Can I ask you what you're taking away tonight? Can you think of one thing that you've heard, or one thing that you're taking away that has had significance for you? I got 7 fingers up. What have you got? Can we think of 7 things? Not afraid of an uncomfortable silence.
I thought that was interesting. The light blue and the dark blue graph of how the different age groups were impacted. How the light blue was kind of like the most impacted was young to and then down to, and the other one went the other way for the age.
Yeah.
Like that was surprising to me. That
Fascinating. Yeah, it is having impact. Okay, so that's one. I need 6 more. What have we got?
I kind of like the triangle about thinking and feeling and actions and the way they interact.
Excellent. Yes. What else have we got?
I like the reminder of the vagus nerve, because we did have a speaker, I think last week, talk about it, or maybe the first week. I can't remember, because we did breathing and meditation and stuff. And so it was just good to see that diagram again and see where that nerve goes.
It's extensive, right?
Yeah.
Fearfully and wonderfully made we are. Okay, 3. What else have we got?
Well, just sort of thinking about how one would go about trying to help someone, if you want to call it help it, but to talk to someone, to engage, and it just a little more insight into how one might approach it. I think that was helpful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Betty. Okay, so 4. I need 3 more.
I appreciated the biblical references. Elijah. Yeah.
Okay. Elijah had mental health too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he managed to get beyond them, right? The Spirit of God comes and ministers and restores and renews. Yeah. All right, I need 2 more.
I think it sort of made me think about the people around me and how to look at what they might be experiencing and not saying, or to see that everybody's going through this in different ways, and I'll probably be thinking about it a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's just that we can have our eyes focused in a different way, our hearts attuned in a different way, to be recognizing more of what is around us. And this is a bit of an aside, but I've been noticing trees differently since I've been worshiping in the Cathedral of the Great Outdoors. See trees differently, and I think I probably see people differently as well, right? And God is causing us to see a new thing as we're moving through this time together. Do we have one more insight anyone would like to share? All right. Well, can I thank you for being such a great group tonight? It's been awesome to be with you. Thanks, Jan, for organizing. I was commending her in one of the breakaway times. She is persistent in getting people's attention for this workshop, and I love it. And thank you for persisting with me.
Thank you
that we
for
were able
being
to work.
flexible and willing to come on in this
awesome.
way. So if people wanted to find you, Julie, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my office is in New Westminster, 309 6th Street, New Westminster. And you can also find me online, tippingpointservices.ca, out of New Westminster as well. So we'd be glad to connect with you that way.
Perfect, thank you. So next week, our guest is Jennifer Lloyd, who just had to leave early. So she would have been here till the end, but she sent me a little note in the chat that she had to leave. And she is a nutritionist who will be talking about gut health and your physical wellness, nutritional wellness. So she will be here next week. I'm going to say this for the recording because everyone else is here. If you'd like to know more about Inlet United Church, come and visit us at inletunited.ca. So thank you again so much, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your evening to join us. We really appreciate you being here, and God bless.